A widowed millionaire tries to get his routine back on track with his young daughter over lunch by the sea. "Daddy, that beggar looks a lot like Mommy," says the little girl, pointing across the street. When he got closer, he was completely shocked by what he saw. Watch until the end to find out who she really was. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The gentle ocean breeze carried the salt-tinged air across the outdoor patio of the seaside restaurant where Marcus Thompson sat with his 4-year-old daughter, Lily. Her golden curls danced in the wind as she carefully arranged her French fries into tiny towers on her plate, a habit she'd picked up in recent months. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across their table, and Marcus found himself lost in thought, watching the way the light played across his daughter's features that reminded him so much of Emily. 18 months had passed since that day, and though he'd developed a routine of sorts, everything still felt mechanical, like going through the motions of living without really being present. The weekly lunch dates with Lily at this restaurant had become their thing, a tradition born from his desperate attempt to create new memories to establish some sense of normalcy in their altered world. "Daddy, can I have ice cream for dessert?" Lily's voice pulled him from his reverie. Her blue eyes sparkled with hope, and Marcus couldn't help but smile. These were the moments that kept him going, the small victories in maintaining some semblance of regular life. "Of course, sweetie. What flavor would you like?" He watched as she scrunched up her nose in deep concentration, a gesture so reminiscent of Emily that it made his heart ache. "Strawberry with sprinkles." She clapped her hands excitedly, and Marcus signaled the waiter. As they waited for the dessert to arrive, Lily continued her architectural experiments with the remaining fries, humming a tune she'd learned at preschool. The restaurant had become their safe haven of sorts. The staff knew them by name now, always ensuring they got their favorite table with the perfect view of the ocean. Marcus appreciated their kindness, the way they slipped extra cookies onto Lily's plate, the gentle smiles that held no pity, just warmth. "Look at the seagulls, Daddy." Lily pointed toward the beach where a flock of birds had gathered near the shoreline. Marcus followed her gaze, taking in the peaceful scene. The waves lapped gently at the shore, and couples strolled hand in hand along the beach. It was the kind of day Emily would have loved. The waiter arrived with Lily's ice cream decorated with an extra helping of rainbow sprinkles that made her eyes grow wide with delight. Marcus watched her dig in, pink ice cream already making its way onto her cheeks. These simple moments of joy were what he lived for now, what kept him putting one foot in front of the other. "Daddy." Lily's voice suddenly took on a different tone, one that made Marcus look up from his coffee. She was staring intently at something across the street, her spoon frozen halfway to her mouth. "What is it, sweetheart? That lady over there." Lily pointed toward the sidewalk across from the restaurant. "She looks just like Mommy." Marcus' heart skipped a beat. He'd learned to steel himself against these moments. Lily often saw her mother in crowds, in shopping malls, in parks. It was part of her processing, the child psychologist had explained. But something in her voice this time made him turn and look. A woman stood at the corner, her attention fixed on the ocean. Her clothes were worn and dirty, her hair unkempt. But there was something in her stance, in the way she held herself, that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. Despite her disabled appearance, there was an undeniable elegance in her posture, a familiar grace that sent a jolt of recognition through his body. Without thinking, he found himself rising from his chair. "Stay right here, Lily. Don't move." His voice sounded strange to his own ears, as if in a dream he made his way toward the restaurant's entrance, his legs moving of their own accord. The woman remained still, seemingly lost in contemplation of the waves. The closer he got, the more his heart raced. It couldn't be possible, he told himself. It was impossible. Yet there was something about her profile, something in the curve of her neck and the way she held her shoulders that was hauntingly familiar. Before he could stop himself, a name escaped his lips, barely more than a whisper. Rebecca. The woman turned, startled by the sound of her name. Her face, though weathered and marked by obvious hardship, held traces of refined beauty. Their eyes met, and Marcus watched as recognition dawned in her expression. Not the recognition he'd half expected, half feared, but something different entirely. Marcus, her voice was hoarse, but carried the ghost of refinement. Marcus Thompson. He stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This woman knew him, knew his name, but not as Emily's husband. There was something else in her eyes, something that spoke of a different connection, a different time. Behind him, through the restaurant's window, Catherine Walsh, Emily's mother, had just arrived for a surprise visit with her granddaughter. She stood motionless, watching the scene unfold with an expression that moved from confusion to recognition to something approaching terror. The woman's eyes darted nervously between Marcus and the ground, her hands fidgeting with the worn edges of her jacket. "I was Emily's roommate in college," she said softly, her voice carrying both warmth and hesitation. "She used to talk about you all the time, even before you two started dating." Marcus felt the world tilt slightly beneath his feet. Rebecca Miller, the name came flooding back to him now. Emily had mentioned her occasionally during their early relationship, always with a mix of fondness and something else he couldn't quite identify. But she'd disappeared from Emily's life so suddenly, so completely that she'd become little more than a footnote in their shared history. "Rebecca," he repeated, this time with recognition. "Emily's friend from Stanford." The words felt strange in his mouth, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. "What happened to you? How did you?" He gestured vaguely at her appearance, immediately regretting the action when he saw her shrink slightly into herself. But Rebecca surprised him by straightening her shoulders, a flash of her former self showing through the years of hardship. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns," she said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I spent years caring for my grandfather after he fell ill. By the time he recovered enough for assisted living, I'd lost touch with everyone, lost my career momentum. Then one thing led to another. And well," she gestured to herself, echoing his earlier emotion with a touch of self-deprecating humor. Inside the restaurant, Lily pressed her face against the window, watching her father with curious eyes. Catherine, who had finally made her way to their table, placed a protective hand on her granddaughter's shoulder, her expression tense as she observed the interaction outside. "Daddy's talking to someone who looks like Mommy," Lily informed her. Grandmother matter-of-factly, returning to her melting ice cream. Catherine's grip on the back of Lily's chair tightened imperceptibly. Outside, Marcus found himself studying Rebecca's face more carefully. The resemblance to Emily that had so startled them was there, but different now that he looked closer, more like sisters who shared certain features than twins. It was in the way she held herself, the angle of her chin, the shape of her eyes. But where Emily had always radiated warmth and certainty, Rebecca seemed to carry a shadow of vulnerability beneath her dignified bearing. "Would you?" Marcus hesitated, surprised by the words forming in his mouth. "Would you like to join us for coffee? Lily and I were just finishing lunch," and he trailed off, uncertain why he was extending the invitation, but knowing somehow that it felt right. Rebecca's eyes widened slightly, a mix of longing and fear crossing her face. "I don't think that would be appropriate. I'm not exactly." She glanced down at her worn clothes. "Please," Marcus heard himself say. "I insist. And I think Emily would have wanted me to help if she knew you were." The mention of Emily's name seemed to strike something in Rebecca. She looked past Marcus toward the restaurant, and he saw the moment she spotted Lily through the window. Something softened in her expression, a gentle light kindling in her eyes. "She looks just like her," Rebecca whispered, and for a moment, Marcus thought he saw tears threatening to spill. "Emily sent me a birth announcement. You know, it was the last time I heard from her." Inside the restaurant, Catherine had pulled out her phone and was scrolling through old photos with trembling fingers, her face growing paler by the moment. She found what she was looking for, a group photo from Emily's college days. There, standing next to her daughter, was a younger version of the woman outside, both of them beaming at the camera with their arms around each other's shoulders. Marcus noticed Rebecca's gaze fixed on the restaurant window, where Lily was now attempting to build a tower with sugar packets under her grandmother's distracted supervision. "That's my daughter, Lily," he said softly. "She's 4 now, I know," Rebecca replied, then quickly added, "I mean, I can tell she has Emily's smile." She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "Marcus, there's something you should know about Emily and me, about why we lost touch." But before she could continue, a commotion from inside the restaurant drew their attention. Lily had knocked over her water glass, and Catherine was rushing to help the waiter clean up the spill, her face a mask of forced composure. The moment shattered, and Rebecca took a step back. "I should go," she said quickly, reaching into her pocket and pulling out a worn business card. "But if you want to talk, I'm usually around this area. The shelter down on Pine Street lets me use their address for mail." She pressed the card into his hand, then turned and hurried away before Marcus could respond. Marcus stood there, watching her disappear around the corner, the card feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. When he finally returned to the table, Catherine was wiping Lily's hands with a napkin, her movements mechanical and tense. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Marcus sat in his home office, Rebecca's worn business card lying on the desk before him. Catherine had left shortly after the incident at the restaurant, citing a headache, but the tension in her shoulders had spoken volumes. He could still feel the weight of her unspoken words hanging in the air. The soft glow of his computer screen illuminated the room as he typed Rebecca's name into the search bar. The results painted a picture of a life that had once held great promise. Stanford University graduate summa cum laude. Several published articles in prestigious psychology journals, a position at a well-respected research institution. Then around 6 years ago, everything stopped. He leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. The Rebecca he'd found online bore little resemblance to the woman he'd met today. Yet something about her drew him in. Perhaps it was the way she'd looked at Lily with a mixture of tenderness and profound sadness that seemed to echo his own feelings. His phone buzzed, displaying Catherine's number. He hesitated before answering. "Marcus," her voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. "We need to talk about what happened today." He closed his eyes, preparing himself. "Catherine, I know." "Listen to me." She cut him off. "That woman, Rebecca Miller, Emily specifically asked her to stay away from our family. Did you know that?" Marcus sat up straighter. "What are you talking about?" "It was during your engagement." Catherine's voice trembled slightly. "Emily came home one weekend absolutely distraught. She wouldn't tell me everything, but she said she'd had to make a difficult decision to protect her future, to protect you and any children you might have." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He glanced at the family photo on his desk. Emily, holding newborn Lily, her smile radiant despite her obvious exhaustion. What had she been protecting them from? Catherine, Rebecca, was her best friend in college. They were roommates for years. What could have possibly? "Sometimes we think we know people." "Marcus," Catherine interrupted, her voice softer now. "Emily was an excellent judge of character. If she felt the need to distance herself from Rebecca, she must have had a good reason." After ending the call, Marcus found himself standing in the doorway of Lily's room, watching his daughter sleep. Her stuffed giraffe, a gift from Emily, was clutched tightly in her arms, and her face held that peaceful expression that made his heart ache with love and protection. The next morning, after dropping Lily at press school, Marcus found himself driving toward Pine Street. The shelter Rebecca had mentioned was a well-maintained building with a small garden out front. A middle-aged woman at the front desk smiled warmly when he inquired about Rebecca. "Oh, Rebecca. She's one of our regulars. Such a gentle soul, the woman said, her eyes softening. She helps us with our children's reading program when she's feeling up to it. The kids adore her. Marcus learned that Rebecca had been coming to the shelter for about 8 months. Before that, she'd been staying with her grandfather in a nursing home, helping with his care despite her own struggles. The staff spoke of her with obvious affection, describing her as quiet but kind, always willing to help others despite her circumstances. He left his number with the desk, asking them to have Rebecca call him if she felt comfortable doing so. As he walked back to his car, his phone chimed with a text from Catherine, coming by to drop off some of Emily's old photos for Lily. We need to finish our conversation. The photos were spread across his dining room table. When Catherine arrived, she pulled out a particular album, flipping to a specific page with determined precision. Here, she said, pointing to a photo of Emily and Rebecca at what appeared to be a college formal. This was taken about a month before everything changed. Marcus studied the image. The two women were dressed elegantly, their arms around each other's waists, laughing at something off camera. They looked so carefree, so happy. Emily's face glowed with youth and joy, and Rebecca looked at Emily with an expression that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. I found Emily crying in her old room the next month. Catherine continued, her voice distant. She'd driven home in the middle of the night. When I asked what was wrong, she just kept saying she'd done what she had to do, that sometimes love meant making impossible choices. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang, an unknown number. His heart jumped as he answered. Mr. Thompson. A hesitant voice came through. This is Rebecca. The shelter said you came by? Rebecca. Yes. He found himself standing, moving away from Catherine's watchful gaze. I've been doing some research trying to understand. Would you be willing to meet? There are things I need to ask you. There was a long pause on the other end. I suppose I owe you that much, she finally said. But Marcus, are you sure you want to know? Some truths can't be unknown once they're spoken. He looked back at the dining room table at Catherine, sitting rigidly in her chair at the photo of Emily, and Rebecca still lying there, their frozen smiles holding secrets he was only beginning to understand. I need to know, he said firmly, for Lily's sake, for Emily's memory, and for my own peace of mind. The coffee shop on Ocean Avenue, Rebecca suggested after another pause. Tomorrow at Henvey Audrey, it's where Emily and I used to study together. As he ended the call, Catherine stood up, gathering the photos with trembling hands. Marcus, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, whatever you learn tomorrow, remember that Emily loved you. Everything she did, every choice she made was out of love. He watched his mother-in-law leave, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on his shoulders. In Lily's room, he could hear his daughter's mobile playing its gentle lullaby, the same one Emily had chosen before she was born. Tomorrow, he would finally understand why his wife had pushed away someone who had once been so important to her. Tomorrow, the past would begin to unravel. The Ocean Avenue coffee shop looked exactly as it had in the old college photos Marcus had found online. Warm wooden tables, mismatched vintage chairs, and local artwork covering the exposed brick walls created an atmosphere that seemed frozen in time. He arrived early, choosing a quiet corner table that offered a view of both the entrance and the street outside. The morning crowd had thinned, leaving only a few students with laptops and a couple of elderly regulars reading newspapers. The scent of freshly ground coffee and baked goods filled the air, and Marcus found himself wondering how many hours Emily had spent here, sharing secrets and dreams with the woman he was about to meet. Rebecca arrived precisely at Henvey Audrey, wearing clean, but clearly second-hand clothes. Her hair was neatly combed, and she'd made an obvious effort to present herself as professionally as possible. She carried herself with the same grace he'd noticed before, though her hands trembled slightly as she slid into the chair across from him. I ordered you a cappuccino, Marcus said, gesturing to the steaming cup before her. Emily once mentioned it was your favorite. A shadow of a smile crossed Rebecca's face. She remembered everything about everyone. she said softly. Every birthday, every preference, every small detail that made someone feel special. The barista brought over a plate of scone, another memory from Emily's stories about her college days, and they sat in silence for a moment, neither quite ready to begin the conversation that would change everything. "Why did you agree to meet me?" Marcus finally asked, studying Rebecca's face carefully. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, as if drawing strength from its heat. "Because Emily would have wanted you to know the truth eventually. She always said you had the kindest heart of anyone she'd ever met. That you'd understand when the time was right." "Understand what, Rebecca? What was so terrible that she had to cut you out of her life completely?" Rebecca's eyes met his, and in them he saw a depth of pain that matched his own. "It wasn't terrible, Marcus. It was love. The wrong kind of love at the wrong time between the wrong people." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Marcus felt his heart rate quicken as pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed began to fall into place. "You were in love with her," he said quietly. Not a question, but a revelation. Rebecca nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes. "And she loved me too in her way. But Emily, she wanted a different life, a normal life. She said, a family, children. Stability, everything her own childhood lacked after her father left." Marcus remembered the early days of his relationship with Emily. How she'd sometimes seemed distant, struggling with something she couldn't or wouldn't express. How she'd throw herself into planning their future with an almost desperate enthusiasm. "The night everything changed," Rebecca continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She came to our apartment in tears. Said she'd been fighting her feelings for months, trying to convince herself she could live two lives, but she couldn't. She showed me the ring you'd given her, and I knew." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I knew that was the end. She asked me to disappear to give her a chance at the life she thought she needed. Said it would be easier if she never had to explain to anyone, never had to face the questions or the judgment. I loved her enough to give her that." Marcus sat back, memories flooding his mind. Emily's occasional melancholy, the way she'd sometimes wake up crying from dreams she refused to discuss, her insistence that they move away from Stanford after graduation despite job offers in the area. "But why stay away after she was gone?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Why live like this when you could have had a different life?" Rebecca's laugh was soft and bitter. "I tried to have a different life. I threw myself into my career, dated other people, tried to forget. But then my grandfather got sick, and taking care of him gave me purpose. When he improved enough for professional care, I was already sliding into depression. The jobs fell through. The relationships ended, and eventually, well, you see what I became." She reached into her worn bag and pulled out an envelope yellowed with age. "Emily wrote me one last letter about a month before your wedding. I've carried it with me ever since, even when I had nothing else left." Marcus stared at the envelope, Emily's familiar handwriting stark against the aged paper. His fingers trembled as he took it. She wrote that if anything ever happened to her, I should find my way back to you. Rebecca said, standing up suddenly. "But not like this, not as someone who needs saving. I should go." "Rebecca, wait," Marcus called out. But she was already moving toward the door, wiping tears from her face. Through the coffee shop window, he watched her walk away, her figure growing smaller against the morning crowd. The letter felt heavy in his hands, weighted with secrets and regrets and possibilities that had never been realized. Back home, he sat in Emily's old reading nook, the letter still unopened on his lap. Through the window, he could see Lily playing in the backyard with her babysitter, her laughter carrying faintly through the glass. In his mind, he heard Emily's voice from their last conversation, words that had seemed odd at the time, but now carried new meaning. "Promise me you'll keep your heart open, Marcus. Love isn't always what we expect it to be." The letter remained unopened on Marcus's desk for 3 days. Every morning he would look at it while drinking his coffee. Emily's handwriting calling to him like a voice from the past. But something held him back. Perhaps the fear that whatever truths lay within those pages would forever change the memory of his marriage. On the fourth morning, as he dropped Lily off at press school, she asked the question that would alter their trajectory once again. "Daddy, why was the lady who looks like Mommy crying at the coffee shop?" Marcus froze, his hand still on the classroom door. "You saw her." Lily nodded, adjusting her backpack straps. "When Miss Sarah took us for our walking field trip, she was sitting alone and looked sad. Can we help her be happy?" The innocent question struck Marcus with unexpected force. He knelt down to Lily's level, studying his daughter's earnest face. In her eyes, he saw Emily's compassion, that same instinctive desire to help others that had made him fall in love with her mother. "Would you like that?" he asked carefully. "To help her?" "Oh, huh." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "She can come to our house for dinner. We can make spaghetti, and she can see my drawings." That evening, after tucking Lily into bed, Marcus finally opened the letter. His hands trembled as he unfolded the delicate paper, revealing Emily's familiar flowing script. "Dearest Rebecca, by the time you read this, I'll be married to Marcus. I want you to know that what I'm doing isn't a rejection of our love, but an embrace of who I need to become. The world we dreamed of building together was beautiful, but it wasn't the one I was meant to live in. Marcus represents everything stable and true that I never had growing up. With him, I can build the family I always yearned for, give my children the security I never knew. But loving him doesn't erase what we shared. It just gives it a different shape, a different meaning. I'm asking you to stay away, not because I don't love you, but because I love you too much. Being near you makes me question everything, and I can't afford to question anymore. I need to be certain, to be steady, to be the kind of mother my children will need. But if anything ever happens to me, if fate takes an unexpected turn, find your way back to them. Marcus has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. He'll understand when the time is right, and any child of mine will need someone who knows how to love as fiercely and completely as you do. Forever yours in a different life." Emily. Marcus sat back in his chair, tears streaming down his face. The words seemed to pulse with Emily's presence, her voice echoing in his mind. After several minutes, he reached for his phone and dialed the shelter's number. The next morning, he stood outside the shelter, his heart pounding as he waited. Rebecca emerged, surprise evident on her face when she saw him. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" He took a deep breath. "I have a proposition for you. It might sound crazy, but please hear me out." Rebecca's expression grew wary, but she nodded. "Lily needs a babysitter," he began. "Her current sitter is moving away next month, and I think you might be perfect for the job. We have a guest room that's just sitting empty, and you clearly have a way with children, according to the shelter staff." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Marcus, you can't be serious after everything I told you." "I read Emily's letter," he interrupted softly. "And I think she knew exactly what she was doing when she wrote it. She wanted us to find each other when the time was right. But your mother-in-law, Catherine, will have to understand this isn't about replacing Emily. It's about honoring her wishes and doing what's best for Lily." He paused, watching emotions play across Rebecca's face. "Plus, Lily saw you at the coffee shop. She wants to help you be happy." Rebecca let out a shaky laugh that was half sob. "She's just like her mother, isn't she?" "In all the best ways," Marcus agreed. "Look, I know it's complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this might be a terrible idea. But I also know that Emily trusted you enough to write that letter, and I trust her judgment even now." He could see the conflict in Rebecca's eyes, the desire wearing with fear and uncertainty. "I don't know if I can," she whispered, "being in her house, surrounded by her things. It won't be easy." Marcus acknowledged. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe healing isn't supposed to be easy. Maybe it's about facing the hard things together." A group of children ran past them, laughing as they headed to the shelter's reading program. Rebecca watched them with longing in her eyes. "You don't have to answer right now," Marcus said gently. But at least come have dinner with us tonight. Lily's requesting spaghetti, and she wants to show you her artwork." Rebecca turned back to him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Emily always said you had a way of making impossible things seem possible. Is that a yes?" She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders in a gesture that reminded him so much of Emily. It made his heart ache. "It's so I'll come to dinner." The rest we'll have to see. As they walked toward his car, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, somewhere, Emily was smiling at them, knowing that her final gift to them all was the chance to heal together. The shelter director watched them from the window, a knowing smile on her face as she held a photograph she'd found in Rebecca's few possessions, a faded picture of 3 young people at a carnival. Emily, Rebecca, and Marcus all laughing, their whole lives still ahead of them. The aroma of garlic and tomato sauce filled the kitchen. As Marcus stirred the pasta, watching Lily arrange her stuffed animals at the dinner table. She had insisted on setting a special place for each of her favorite toys, explaining that they needed to help make their guest feel welcome. "Do you think she likes unicorns?" Daddy, Lily asked, carefully positioning her prized purple unicorn next to what would be Rebecca's plate. "I'm sure she'll love them," Marcus assured her, trying to calm his own nerves. The simple dinner suddenly felt weighted with significance, like a scene from a play where every gesture carried hidden meaning. The doorbell rang at exactly 6, and Lily raced to answer it with Marcus close behind. Rebecca stood on the porch, holding a small potted plant and wearing clothes that the shelter had helped her find. Simple but clean, her hair pulled back neatly. "I brought this," she said, holding out the plant. "It's an African violet. Emily always loved them." Marcus took the plant, noting how Rebecca's hands trembled slightly. Before anyone could say anything else, Lily grabbed Rebecca's hand and pulled her toward the dining room. "Come see my drawings. I made them special for you." The wall next to the dining table had been transformed into an impromptu art gallery with Lily's crayon masterpieces taped at child height. Rebecca knelt down, allowing Lily to guide her through each piece with the serenity of a museum curator. "This is our house," Lily explained, pointing to a colorful rectangle with a triangle roof. "And this is Daddy and me and all my stuffed animals. And look," she pointed to a figure drawn in yellow crayon. "This is Mommy as a star in the sky watching over us." Rebecca's breath caught and Marcus saw her blink back tears, but her voice was steady as she praised each drawing, asking questions that made Lily beam with pride. During dinner, Marcus watched in amazement as Lily chatted away, telling Rebecca about her preschool adventures and favorite books. Rebecca listened intently, responding with genuine interest and gentle humor that drew even more stories from the little girl. "You're good with her," Marcus observed during a rare quiet moment when Lily was concentrated on twirling her spaghetti. Rebecca smiled softly. "I used to want to be a child psychologist before everything. Children have such pure hearts. They see the world so clearly without all the complications we adults create. Is that why you help with the reading program at the shelter?" She nodded. "It reminds me of who I used to be, who I still am underneath everything else." She paused, watching Lily successfully capture a particularly challenging strand of spaghetti. "Emily used to say that working with children was my superpower. She said I had a way of making them feel safe and understood." "Daddy," Lily interrupted marinara sauce, decorating her chin. "Can Rebecca read me my bedtime story tonight?" Marcus glanced at Rebecca, seeing both desire and uncertainty in her eyes. "If Rebecca would like to, sweetie." "I'd love to," Rebecca said softly, then added with a small laugh, "as long as you don't mind marinara sauce on your books." Later, as Rebecca sat in the reading chair in Lily's room, the little girl curled trustingly against her side. Marcus stood in the doorway watching them. Rebecca's voice rose and fell with the rhythm of the story, giving each character a distinct personality that had Lily giggling with delight. The scene stirred something in his heart. Not pain, as he'd feared, but a gentle warmth. He could almost hear Emily's voice from her letter. Any child of mine will need someone who knows how to love as fiercely and completely as you do." After Lily had fallen asleep, they stood in the hallway, the evening's emotions hanging heavy between them. "The guest room is yours," Marcus said quietly. "Whenever you're ready. No pressure, no expectations. Just a place to start over." Rebecca looked down the hallway toward the room, then back at him. "Are you sure about this, Marcus?" "Really sure. Because once we start down this path," "I'm sure," he interrupted gently. "Emily trusted both of us to find our way here. And watching you with Lily tonight, I understand why." She nodded slowly, tears gleaming in her eyes. "I'll need a few days to say goodbye to people at the shelter to prepare myself. Take all the time you need. We'll be here." As Marcus walked Rebecca to her cab that evening, the spring air was soft with promise. Above them, stars peppered the clear sky, and he thought of Lily's drawing, Emily as a star watching over them all. Somehow, in ways he couldn't yet fully understand, their broken pieces were beginning to find new ways to fit together. Catherine's car was parked across the street, though she made no move to get out. Marcus saw her watching them, her expression unreadable in the darkness. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring difficult conversations and hard truths. But tonight, for the first time in 18 months, his house felt less like a memorial and more like a home. The confrontation with Catherine came sooner than Marcus had expected. She appeared at his door early the next morning, her normally perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled, her eyes bearing the shadows of a sleepless night. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she demanded, brushing past him into the foyer. "Inviting a homeless woman to live in your house, to take care of my granddaughter." Marcus closed the door quietly, conscious of Lily still sleeping upstairs. "Catherine, please lower your voice." "Don't you dare tell me to lower my voice," she hissed, though she did decrease her volume. "Emily specifically asked that woman to stay away from her family. I have the right to protect my granddaughter from what exactly?" Marcus interrupted, his own voice tight with controlled emotion. "From someone Emily trusted enough to write a letter to, asking her to look after us if anything ever happened." Catherine's face went pale. "What letter?" Marcus led her to his study, retrieving Emily's letter from his desk drawer. He watched as Catherine sank into a chair, her hands trembling as she read her daughter's last words to Rebecca. "This can't be real," she whispered. But the denial in her voice was weak. "Emily wouldn't." "She did," Marcus said gently, "because she knew something you are only beginning to understand, that love doesn't always fit into the neat boxes we try to put it in." Catherine looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "She never told me all those years. She was trying to be the daughter she thought you needed," Marcus said, kneeling beside her chair. "Just like she tried to be the wife and mother she thought we needed. But she was wise enough to leave us a path to healing, even if it's not the one we expected." A small voice from the doorway made them both turn. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Lily stood there in her butterfly pajamas, clutching her purple unicorn. Catherine quickly wiped her eyes, opening her arms. Lily rushed into them, wrapping her small arms around her grandmother's neck. "I'm just missing your mommy, sweetheart," Catherine said softly. "Me too," Lily said. Then, with the simple wisdom of children, she added, "But Rebecca knows lots of stories about Mommy from college. She told me one last night about how Mommy once helped save a baby bird that fell from its nest." Catherine's arms tightened around her granddaughter. "She did." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Aha." And Rebecca said, "Mommy made a special little bed for it in a shoe box and fed it with a tiny dropper until it was strong enough to fly away, just like in my favorite book." Marcus watched as something shifted in Catherine's expression. She looked down at the letter in her hand, then back at her granddaughter. Would you tell me more stories that Rebecca shared about your mommy?" Over breakfast, Lily regaled her grandmother with the stories Rebecca had told during dinner. And story time. With each tale, Marcus could see Catherine's rigid posture softening slightly, her defensive anger giving way to a more complex emotion. When Lily left to get dressed for press school, Catherine remained at the table, staring into her coffee cup. "I always wondered why Emily stopped talking about her college years," she said finally. "She used to tell me everything, and then suddenly it was like those years disappeared." "She was trying to protect everyone," Marcus said. "Including you, including Rebecca, including herself. And now we honor her wisdom by trusting her judgment. She knew what she was doing when she wrote that letter, Catherine. She knew Rebecca would need us as much as we would need her." Catherine stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "I can't promise to be comfortable with this, Marcus," but she paused, picking up Emily's letter. "May I keep this just for a few days? I need to understand my daughter better." Marcus nodded. "Of course. And Catherine, Rebecca moves in next week. It would mean a lot to Lily and to Emily's memory. If you could find it in your heart to give her a chance." Later that afternoon, as Marcus helped Rebecca move her few belongings from the shelter to his house, his phone chimed with a text from Catherine. "I found Emily's college journals in the attic. When you're ready, there are things you both should know." Rebecca was arranging her modest collection of books on the guest room shelf when Marcus told her about Catherine's message. She froze, a worn copy of the Velveteen Rabbit in her hands. Emily kept journals. Her voice was barely a whisper, apparently. "So, Catherine says there are things we should know." Rebecca placed the book carefully on the shelf, her fingers lingering on its spine. "There were so many things we never said out loud back then. So many truths we thought we had to hide." She turned to face Marcus, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Are you sure you want to know them all?" He thought about the photograph the shelter director had shown him as they left, the three of them at the carnival, young and laughing and unaware of the complexities that lay ahead. "I think," he said slowly, "that Emily left us breadcrumbs to follow, and maybe the only way forward is to follow them together." A crash of thunder made them both jump, and seconds later they heard Lily's voice from downstairs. "Daddy, Rebecca, can we make a pillow fort? The storm is scary." They shared a look, and for the first time since Rebecca had moved in, they both smiled genuinely. "Pillow fort engineering is one of my specialties," Rebecca said, her voice lighter, as they descended the stairs together. Another rumble of thunder shook the house, but inside, surrounded by blankets and pillows, and Lily's delighted giggles, they were building something new, a shelter from all their storms, both past and present. The journals arrived on a Sunday afternoon, delivered by Catherine herself. She placed the box on Marcus's kitchen counter with the careful reverence usually reserved for sacred objects. 3 leather-bound books, their pages yellowed and dog-eared, held the unspoken stories of Emily's college years. "I haven't read them," Catherine said, her voice catching slightly. "I couldn't. They were her private thoughts, and I needed to respect that even now." Rebecca, who had been helping Lily with a puzzle in the living room, stood frozen in the doorway. The sight of the journals seemed to physically affect her, as if their mere presence had altered the air in the room. "Should we?" Marcus began, but Catherine interrupted him. "I'll take Lily to the park," she said, surprising both of them. "You two need to do this together. Emily would have wanted that." As Catherine and Lily's voices faded down the driveway, Marcus and Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, the journals between them, like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. "You should read them first," Rebecca said softly. "She was your wife." Marcus shook his head. "She was your best friend first, and these journals, they're from your time together. You should start." With trembling hands, Rebecca opened the first journal. Emily's familiar handwriting flowed across the pages, full of youth and hope and uncertainty. September 15th, 2006. Rebecca moved in today. She has this way of making a space feel like home instantly. She hung fairy lights around our dorm room windows and arranged her books by color instead of author. When I asked why, she said, "Because beauty matters more than order sometimes. I think I'm going to like living with her." Rebecca's voice broke as she read the words aloud. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand, encouraging her to continue. December 3rd, 2006. I can't stop thinking about the way Rebecca laughs. It's like music, but better somehow. Today in the library, she was telling me about her dreams of working with troubled children, and her whole face lit up. I've never met anyone who cares so deeply about healing others. Sometimes when she talks, I forget to breathe. They took turns reading entries, watching their shared past unfold through Emily's eyes. The joy of friendship deepening into something more complex. The fear of acknowledging feelings that didn't fit into their carefully planned futures. The moment everything changed. March 12, 2007. Met a guy in my economics class today, Marcus Thompson. He has kind eyes and talks about wanting a big family someday. When he smiles, I can see the future I'm supposed to want. The one my mom always dreamed of for me after Dad left. A stable home, children, Sunday dinners with grandparents. Everything Rebecca and I could never have in this world. But when I got back to our room and saw her asleep on her bed, surrounded by psychology textbooks, my heart felt like it was being torn in two. How can I want two such different futures at the same time? Marcus had to stop reading, his vision blurring. Rebecca's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white with tension. April 30th, 2007. Marcus asked me out today. I said yes. When I told Rebecca, she smiled and said she was happy for me, but I saw something break in her eyes, and I'll never forgive myself for being the one who put that look there. They read through the years of college, through Emily's growing relationship with Marcus, running parallel to her unspoken love for Rebecca, through late-night conversations and shared secrets, through the pain of choosing between two kinds of love. The final entry, dated just before graduation, made them both catch their breath. I love them both so completely in such different ways. Marcus is my future, my chance at building the family I've always dreamed of. But Rebecca is the poem I'll never be brave enough to write, the song I'll never be strong enough to sing. Years from now, when I'm living the life I've chosen, I'll still hear her laugh in my dreams. And maybe, if I'm lucky, she'll find her way back to us somehow. Because love this pure doesn't really end. It just changes shape, waiting for the right moment to bloom again. As Rebecca closed the final journal, silence filled the kitchen. Outside, they could hear Lily's laughter as she returned from the park with Catherine, the sound floating through the windows like a reminder of all that had led them to this moment. She never stopped loving either of us. Marcus said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Rebecca nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. She found a way to love us both, even when she thought she had to choose. They sat there as the afternoon light faded, the journals between them now feeling less like a barrier and more like a bridge. In the living room, they could hear Lily showing Catherine her latest art project, their voices mixing with the familiar sounds of home. "What do we do now?" Rebecca asked softly. Marcus looked at the journals, then at the woman his wife had loved enough to let go, enough to guide back to them when the time was right. "We honor her love," he said simply. "All of it." The weeks following the discovery of Emily's journals brought subtle changes to the household. Rebecca's presence grew more assured, her movements through the house less hesitant. She and Lily developed their own little rituals. Wednesday afternoon baking sessions, Saturday morning story hours in the garden, and impromptu dance parties in the kitchen while preparing dinner. But it was the evening traditions that touched Marcus the most deeply. Each night, Rebecca would help Lily create a star message for Emily, a small drawing or note that they would tape to the bedroom window facing the night sky. The practice had begun spontaneously one evening when Lily had been particularly missing her mother. "If Mommy's a star now," Lily had reasoned, "she can read our messages from up there." The tradition stuck, and soon the window became a kaleidoscope of colorful papers, each holding pieces of Lily's heart written in crayon and glitter. One evening, as Marcus passed by Lily's room, he overheard a conversation that made him pause. In the hallway, "Rebecca!" Lily's voice was thoughtful. "Did you love my mommy?" Marcus held his breath, waiting for Rebecca's response. Through the partially open door, He could see them sitting together in the window seat, working on that evening's star message. "Yes, sweetheart," Rebecca answered after a moment. "I loved her very much. She was my best friend in college, like how Jenny is my best friend at school." Rebecca's laugh was soft and slightly watery. "Something like that. Your mommy had a way of making everyone around her feel special and loved." "Daddy says I have her smile," Lily said proudly. "You do, and her kind heart, too." Rebecca helped Lily fold a corner of her paper into a star shape. "You know what else you have of hers? Her ability to see the good in everyone. That's a very special gift. Is that why you came to live with us? Because you saw the good in us?" Marcus watched as Rebecca gathered Lily into a gentle hug. "I came because your mommy was wise enough to know that sometimes the best families are the ones we build together, piece by piece." Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Marcus found Rebecca in the kitchen making tea. The evening light cast long shadows across the counter, and for a moment he was struck by how natural she looked there, as if she'd always belonged in this space. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for what you said to Lily tonight." Rebecca turned, not entirely surprised that he had overheard. "I've been thinking about the journals," she said, offering him a cup of tea, "about how Emily managed to love so completely, so unselfishly. She chose you, chose this life, but she never stopped believing in the power of different kinds of love." Marcus leaned against the counter, cradling his cup. "I've been thinking about that, too, about how we're taught that love has to fit into certain categories, certain boxes. But Emily, she saw beyond that. She always did." Rebecca smiled softly. "Do you remember that carnival photo? The one from the shelter? The three of us laughing at something I can't even remember now." Emily remembered, Rebecca said, pulling something from her pocket. A folded piece of paper that had clearly been read many times. "I found this tucked into one of her journals. It's a note she wrote about that day." Marcus took the paper carefully, unfolding it to reveal Emily's handwriting. "Today at the carnival, I watched the two people I love most in the world share a cotton candy and laugh at terrible carnival jokes. They don't know it yet, but they're both going to be such important parts of my story." Marcus with his dreams of family and his gentle strength. Rebecca with her wild heart and her ability to heal broken things. "Sometimes I think God gave me two great loves, not to force a choice, but to show me that love multiplies rather than divides." The words blurred as Marcus' eyes filled with tears. "She knew," he whispered. Even then, she knew this moment would come. Rebecca placed her hand over his where it rested on the counter. "She knew we'd find our way here in our own time, that we'd learn to build something new out of all our broken pieces." A soft sound from the doorway made them both look up. Catherine stood there holding a photo album. "I found more pictures," she said quietly. "From their college years. I thought maybe we could look at them together. Help Lily know all the sides of her mother." The tension that had lingered between Catherine and Rebecca seemed to soften slightly as they shared a look of understanding. Emily's mother moved into the kitchen, placing the album on the counter between them. "She looks so happy here," Catherine said, opening to a page showing Emily and Rebecca in their dorm room, surrounded by books and fairy lights. "I never understood why she stopped telling me about these years. But now you know she was trying to protect everyone's hearts." Rebecca finished gently. Catherine nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek, including her own. She turned to another page showing Emily, Marcus, and Rebecca at a campus coffee shop. "Tell me about this day. Tell me about my daughter when she was young and full of dreams." As they sat around the kitchen table sharing stories and memories, the night grew deep around them. Above, Lily slept peacefully, her latest star message twinkling in her window. "Dear Mommy, I think you sent us an angel to help us remember you better. Love, Lily." Outside, a shooting star streaked across the sky as if an answer to a little girl's faith and a love